A key turns, but truth stays locked away. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Drop a comment with your location. I appreciate every one of you. Let's start. If you want to know how quiet a house can be, come to our place on West 35th Street at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning, when the orchids are getting their proper attention upstairs, and the only sound downstairs is the steady, offended breathing of a man who considers the world a nuisance and has made a career of being right about it. That man was Nero Wolfe, and the breathing was offended because I had suggested, mildly, conversationally, like a fellow tossing a peanut to a seal, that perhaps the world wasn't quite so monstrous as he claimed. "It is not monstrous," Wolfe said without looking at me. His eyes, heavy-lidded and watchful, they stayed on the page of a book propped on the red leather of his desk blotter. It is merely inexhaustible in its capacity to intrude. He turned a page as if the paper had insulted him. I was in the office, of course. That's where I always am when I'm not out earning the money that keeps the beer cold, the orchids pampered, and Fritz's sauces from being regulated by the Department of Agriculture. I was perched on the edge of a chair, my feet planted, my hat on my knee, and my mood was what you might call cautiously cheerful. We had no clients scheduled. That alone was enough to make a man whistle, except whistling is frowned on in the brownstone, right up there with chewing gum and discussing the New York Giants at the table. The bell rang. It wasn't a timid ring either. It was a confident press that said the finger on the button belonged to someone who expected doors to open. Fritz, who could hear a mosquito sneeze in the kitchen, moved with his unhurried dignity and went to answer it. Wolfe didn't look up. "If it is a salesman," he said, "I will be obliged to you, Archie, if you dispatch him with dispatch." "I'm a regular executioner," I said. "I'll do it gently, though, with a silk rope." Fritz's footsteps returned. He appeared in the doorway with the faintest lift of his eyebrows. Fritz's equivalent of a trumpet fanfare. "There is a lady," he said, "and she asks for Mr. Wolfe. She says it is, how do you say, important, and also it is quick." Wolfe's eyes rose, stopping halfway to his full stare, as if even looking at me was too much exercise before noon. "Quick," he repeated. No, that is a word employed by persons who intend to consume my time." "That's not fair," I said. "Some people use it honestly, like when they're bleeding." Fritz added with diplomatic precision, "She does not appear to be bleeding." Wolfe made a sound that was not quite a sigh, not quite a growl. "Very well. Archie, your duties." My duties, as always, were to stand between Wolfe and the world like a cheerful doorman who happens to carry a blackjack in his pocket. I got up, crossed to the reception room, and met the lady before she got any farther into the sanctum than the threshold. She was in her early 30s, dressed with expensive restraint, gray wool, no jewelry worth commenting on, and gloves that had never met a sink. And she carried herself the way women do when they've been told their whole life that doors open for them, and they've rarely had to touch the knob. The kind that could ruin a man's afternoon without raising her voice. She introduced herself promptly. "My name is Lila Vane." I waited for the rest of it, the "and I need your help," or the "and I've been followed," or the "and I'm terrified." Instead, she held out something in her gloved palm. It was a key, not a big antique skeleton key that would have looked good on a hook in a Gothic novel. This was a modern brass key, clean and unscuffed, the sort of thing you'd get cut at a hardware store on 9th Avenue while you waited and stared at the display of cheap padlocks. It had no tag, no marking, no fancy bow, just metal with a few ridges and an ordinary cut. The key sat on her glove like a dare. "I'd like to see Mr. Wolfe," she said. "That can be arranged," I told her. "He's in a charitable mood. Don't faint when you see him. It makes him suspicious." Her lips twitched, not a smile, just acknowledgement that she understood what humor was supposed to look like. "I won't faint." "Good. Come on in." I escorted her to the office doorway and announced her. Wolfe said good morning as if morning had personally offended him. I waved her toward the client chair. She didn't sit right away. She walked to Wolfe's desk and placed the key carefully on the red leather blotter, dead center, as if she were laying down a piece of evidence in a courtroom. Wolfe's eyes went to it and stopped there. For a full 3 seconds, he didn't blink. That was the Wolfe version of interest. Not movement, but the precise distribution of attention. Then he looked up at her. "Miss Vane, you have brought me a key." "Yes. And?" Wolfe's voice was calm, but there was a thread in it, like a wire in a velvet glove. "It opens nothing," she said. I couldn't help it. "Then it's a lousy key." She glanced at me. "It opened something yesterday. Today it opens nothing. The lock has been changed, or the door has been replaced. Either way, it has been made useless." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a fraction, which in him counted as an athletic event. "That is a circumstance," he said. "It is not a problem. If a lock has been changed, one acquires a new key." "I can't." Her voice stayed steady, but she was holding her hands together now, fingers tight in her gloves. "I'm not supposed to have had this one." Ah. Now we were getting somewhere. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, which was like a bear deciding whether to swat a fly or ignore it. "Explain," he said. She sat then, very straight, not touching the chair's arms. People who touch the arms are comfortable. People who don't are either very proud or very nervous. She was trying hard to be the first. "This key," she said, "was given to me by a man named Henry Marlowe." Wolfe's face didn't change, but I felt it in the room the way you feel a shift in air before a storm. Names do that sometimes, especially when they're attached to money or trouble. I hadn't heard of Henry Marlowe, but Wolfe had a filing system in his head that could catalogue 1,000 nuisances by category. "I do not know him," Wolfe said. "You will," she replied quietly. "He owns Lark and Sloane." That did it. Even I knew Lark and Sloane. If you've ever bought a suit you couldn't afford, or watched a rich man purchase one without blinking, you've heard the name. They made clothing for people who believed the world should be tailored to fit them. Their flagship shop on Madison Avenue was the kind of place where a man could spend more than my monthly salary and still have the clerk look faintly disappointed. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Proceed." "I was engaged to be married," she said. "Not to Mr. Marlowe. To someone else. That engagement ended. Recently. I moved out of an apartment on East 72nd Street that I had shared for 3 years. I needed work." She paused, then added as if the words were distasteful. "I needed independence." "That is a need," Wolfe said, "which the world often punishes." She gave him a quick look, as if she wasn't sure whether he was sympathizing or judging. With Wolfe, it can be either or both. He keeps his moral decisions behind a locked door and makes you bring your own key. "Mr. Marlowe offered me a position," she continued. "Executive liaison. It sounds vague because it is. I was to smooth things, arrange meetings, handle conflicts, make certain that unpleasant matters did not reach his desk." "Ah," I said. "Professional silencer." She ignored me. "His office is not at the Madison Avenue store. It's elsewhere. A townhouse on East 61st. Yesterday afternoon he asked me to come at 6 o'clock after most of his staff had left. He told me to use the back entrance. He handed me this key and said it would open the alley gate and the service door." Wolfe's gaze flicked to the key again. "And you did so?" "Yes. I entered. He was not there." "You waited for 15 minutes. Then I went to his office." She inhaled, controlled. "The door was slightly open. I saw a safe. It was open." Wolfe did not move. He did not need to. The word safe had done the job. "Continue," he said softly. "I didn't touch it," she said quickly. "I didn't go in. I just saw a stack of folders, and something else. A small velvet pouch. I cleared my throat. You're going to tell us you didn't touch that either? I didn't. But I heard someone behind me. I turned, and there was a man in the hallway. He was not staff. He wore a dark coat, and he looked at me as if he had found what he expected to find. He said, "You're early." And then he smiled. Her fingers tightened again. I left. I didn't run. I walked out, locked the door behind me, and returned the key to my pocket. I went home. Wolfe's expression was as readable as a wall. "And today," he said, "the key opens nothing." She nodded. "This morning Mr. Marlowe called and asked me to come at 9. Regular entrance," he said. When I arrived, he greeted me as if nothing unusual had occurred. He spoke about schedules and press. Then he asked casually whether I had any difficulties entering the building yesterday. "And you said?" I said no. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "Prudent." "Then," she said, "he asked me to give him the key back." "And you did not," Wolfe guessed. "I said I had misplaced it." "And he believed you?" "I don't know." She hesitated. He didn't argue. He simply said, "Find it." Then he looked at my hands while he said it. Wolfe stared at her, and I could practically hear the gears in his head making their quiet, expensive clicks. Outside, somewhere, a taxi honked and a city lived its busy life. Inside, in that office, Wolfe was already arranging the world into a puzzle and deciding which pieces belonged. "Miss Vane," he said finally, "why have you come here?" She met his eyes. "Because I think I was used. I think someone wanted me to be seen near that office. Someone wanted a witness or a scapegoat. Now the key is useless, which means the situation has changed. People don't change locks because they're bored." Wolfe nodded faintly. "People change locks because they are frightened, or because they are guilty, or because they are clever and wish to appear frightened or guilty." "Yes," she said, almost relieved. "Exactly." "And what do you fear specifically?" Wolfe asked. "I fear that whatever was in that safe is no longer in it," she said. "And I fear that I have been placed in the story of its disappearance, and I fear—" Her voice caught and then steadied again, "that Mr. Marlowe is not the one who is truly in control." Wolfe's mouth tightened, not in anger, but in recognition of a pattern he'd seen too many times. A wealthy man with too many doors, too many keys, and too many people who wanted to open them. I leaned against the filing cabinet, casual as a lamp. "You're saying there's theft? Maybe blackmail, maybe a setup. No body yet?" "No body," she agreed. Wolfe's eyes stayed on her. "You have brought me an object," he said. "An object that signifies access, and you have brought me a suspicion that access has been revoked." "Yes." "And you wish me to do what?" Wolfe asked. She swallowed. "Find out what that key was meant to open, and who wanted it to open." Wolfe shifted his gaze to the key again. "An interesting inversion," he murmured. "Usually one seeks a key to open something. Here one has the key and must discover the something." I couldn't resist. "A key that opened nothing," I said. "Sounds like one of those philosophical riddles they torture freshmen with." Wolfe gave me a look that suggested the torture of freshmen was insufficiently imaginative. Then he returned to Miss Vane. "My fee," he said, "is $1,000 a day plus expenses." She didn't blink. Agreed. That was another clue. People who blink at Wolfe's fee are either honest or broke. People who don't are either rich or scared. Wolfe continued, "You will remain available. You will answer questions fully. You will do nothing without consulting me, especially in your dealings with Mr. Marlowe." "I understand." Wolfe's eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary, as if he were memorizing the exact shape of her composure, looking for the weak seam. Then he said, almost casually, "You said you were engaged." "To whom?" Her posture changed, just a fraction. "Pride, maybe, or old hurt. To a man named Paul Renshaw. Wolfe's head tilted. Renshaw, he repeated. I watched him. That name landed in the Wolfe cabinet labeled Known Quantities. I didn't like that cabinet. It had too many sharp objects in it. Do you know him? I asked. Wolfe ignored me, still looking at Miss Vane. Why did your engagement end? She hesitated. The gloves creaked a little. Because I discovered he was not who he presented himself to be. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. In what manner? In the manner that matters, she said quietly. He lied about money, about business, about what he was capable of. Wolfe sat back again, as if he had just received confirmation of something he suspected and didn't like. He did not touch the key, but his attention held it pinned like a specimen. Very well, he said. Archie. Yes, sir. Go to East 61st Street, Wolfe said. Find the townhouse. Observe the entrances. Learn who controls access, literal and figurative. Make inquiries discreetly. And, Archie, his eyes flicked to the key. Do not attempt to use it. I grinned. Me? Use a key? I'm insulted. I'd pick the lock like a gentleman. Wolfe's mouth did not so much as twitch. If you are arrested, you will be obliged to pay your own bail. Miss Vane watched us, her expression unreadable now, as she had crossed the threshold of the brownstone with a small piece of brass and an even smaller piece of truth, and she was waiting to see whether Wolfe would turn it into a weapon. Fritz appeared silently at the doorway, as if he'd been summoned by the scent of trouble. He glanced at Wolfe, then at the key, then at Miss Vane. Coffee? Fritz asked politely, as if coffee were the answer to all human folly. Please, Miss Vane said, and for the first time her voice sounded tired. Wolfe nodded once. Fritz vanished. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction, which for him was like a ship adjusting its course. Miss Vane, he said, there are keys that open doors, keys that open safes, and keys that open men's mouths. Your key may be any of these. Or it may be a key that opens nothing because it was never meant to open anything at all, and accept the opportunity to blame you. Her eyes widened slightly. Then what should I do? Wolfe's voice turned firm, almost gentle, which from him is like velvet wrapped around steel. You should sit, he said. You should speak only when asked. You should not attempt to be brave. And you should eat when Fritz offers food. Hunger makes people stupid. She stared at him a moment, then gave a single, small nod. All right. I picked up my hat from my knee and slid my arms into my jacket. The world was intruding, sure, but it was doing it with style. A brass key, a rich man, a changed lock, and a woman who knew she'd stepped into a game where the rules weren't posted. As I moved toward the hall, Wolfe's voice stopped me. One more thing, Archie. I turned. Wolfe's eyes were on the key, but I knew he was talking to me. Do not, he said. Will she permit this matter to disturb the orchids? I couldn't help laughing. Don't worry, I said. If this case tries to mess with the orchids, I'll arrest it myself. And I went out, while behind me the brownstone held its breath, quiet, offended, and ready to be disturbed. I went down the front steps with the key's weight in my mind, and Miss Vane's careful voice in my ear, and the January air hit me like a reminder that the city doesn't care what kind of puzzles you're carrying. The brownstone door closed behind me with that soft, final sound I've always liked, like a judge tapping a gavel. Inside, Wolfe would be settling deeper into his chair, and outside I had the job he always gave me first. Go look at the world and bring back the parts that didn't fit. At least 61st Street was doing its usual act. Dignified facades with discreet doormen, expensive cars that had never known a dent, and pedestrians who walked as if the sidewalk were a private asset. I didn't go straight to the townhouse. I never do, if I can help it. When you go straight to a place, you announce that the place matters to you, and New York has ears. So I crossed the street, went half a block past, and bought a newspaper from a guy who looked like he'd been selling newspapers since the Dutch first got tired of tulips. I leaned against the corner, unfolded the paper, and used it the way God intended, as camouflage. The townhouse was easy to spot once you knew you were looking for a back entrance. The front was respectable. Brownstone steps, a glossy door, brass fixtures polished by someone else's pride. But down the side, in between buildings, there was a narrow service alley with a gate. The gate was iron, black paint, the kind that clanged when you shut it unless you cared enough to do it gently. A lock sat on it, not the flimsy kind you buy when you're trusting, but a heavy one with a fresh shine to it. Fresh. That matched Miss Vane's opens nothing. A new lock would do it. I watched the gate for 10 minutes and saw one delivery guy approach, rattle it, frown, and then go around front. That told me the new lock wasn't just for midnight villains. It was for everybody. At 11:23, yes, I looked. I saw a man come out of the townhouse's side door into the alley. He wasn't carrying anything, and he moved like someone who had practiced not looking around. That he locked the side door behind him and then did something that made my eyebrows lift. He checked the gate lock with his fingertips, like a pianist checking a key. He had a thin face, a narrow mouth, and the kind of hat that makes you suspect the man thinks hats are for anonymity, not style. He started down the alley toward the gate, and I let him get close before I pushed off the corner and stepped into his path like I belonged there. "Excuse me," I said in my best harmless voice, the one that makes old ladies tell me their troubles and policemen forget to ask questions. "Can you tell me if this is the service entrance for Lark and Sloane?" He stopped. His eyes flicked over me. Shoes, coat, face, and settled somewhere around my collar as if he didn't want to give me the dignity of eye contact. "No," he said. That was it. It's just no, not "there's no service entrance," not "who are you?" just a shut door of a word. "Okay," I said pleasantly. "Then I'm lost. That happens. I'm looking for Henry Marlowe's office." That got him. His eyes sharpened, and I saw the calculation start. "Who are you?" he asked. "Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." I've thrown that name at a lot of people. It's like tossing a pebble into a pond. You can tell the size of the fish by the ripples. With this guy, the ripple was a pause and a tightening around the mouth. He said, "Mr. Marlowe is not receiving." "It's fine," I said. "I'm not receiving him either. I just need to confirm an address. My boss hates wasting steps." He hesitated. That hesitation was a door opening a crack. "This is a private residence," he said. "Sure," I agreed. "It's also a business address. And I'm allergic to confusion. Who are you?" He didn't like being questioned. Men like him never do. "My name is Caldwell," he said after a beat. "I manage the premises." "Manager," I said. "That explains the lock." "New." His eyes narrowed. "There have been concerns." "Concerns about what?" He almost said, "None of your business," but managed to restrain himself. "Trespass," he said. "We had an incident." "Yesterday?" I asked, as casually as if I were asking about the weather. That did it. His gaze snapped to mine. "Who told you that?" I smiled. "New York tells me lots of things. I listen. So yesterday." He swallowed something. There was an unauthorized entry. "Through the back gate." I nodded toward the lock. He didn't answer directly. "The lock has been replaced?" I noticed. I leaned in just slightly, friendly and confidential. "Let me give you a tip, Mr. Caldwell. When you replace a lock that quickly, people think you're afraid. When people think you're afraid, they get curious." He stiffened. "I'm not afraid." "Then you should get a better line of work," I said. "All right. I won't keep you. Can you tell Mr. Marlowe that Nero Wolfe's office would appreciate a call?" It's about a key that no longer opens anything." The words were bait. I tossed them gently and watched them sink. Caldwell's face didn't change much, but his throat moved. A swallow, a tell. He said, "I will inform him," and then he stepped around me, opened the gate with a key of his own, smoothly, practiced, and went out to the street. I let him go. Following him right then would have been like lighting a match in a room full of gas. Better to let the smell spread. I waited a few minutes, and then walked around to the front like an ordinary citizen with ordinary business. There was no doorman, which was odd for that street, but there was a bell panel with names. One of them was Marlowe, and another was Caldwell. No company name. Private, but not as private as they wanted to be. I rang. A voice answered through a speaker, cautious. "Yes?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "Nero Wolfe." Pause. Then, "One moment." A click, the door buzzed, and I stepped into a small vestibule that smelled faintly of lemon polish and money. The inner door opened, and a woman stood there, a real receptionist, which meant this was not a private residence, no matter how much they pretended. She was in her 40s, hair tight, eyes tight, expression trained. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, not as a greeting, but as a label. "Mr. Marlowe is occupied." "I'm not surprised," I said. "That's how rich men stay rich, by being occupied. I'll wait 5 minutes." "Mr. Marlowe does not receive," I finished for her. "Yes, Caldwell told me. I'm collecting refusals today. It's a hobby." Her mouth tightened. "Who is Caldwell?" That was interesting. Either she genuinely didn't know, which would mean Caldwell worked outside her orbit, or she was pretending not to know, which would mean Caldwell worked inside a different orbit, one that didn't overlap with hers by design. "Your manager," I said lightly. Thin face, hat like a secret. Her eyes flickered. "Oh, Mr. Caldwell. Yes." So she did know him. The flicker meant something. Fear, annoyance, rivalry. Take your pick. "Look," I said, lowering my voice. "I'm not here to sell encyclopedias. I'm here because a woman was given a key to the back gate yesterday evening, used it, and today the lock is new. That's not housekeeping. That's panic. Nero Wolfe wants to know why." The receptionist's fingers tightened on the edge of the door. "What woman?" "Lila Vane." That name hit her like a slap. She recovered fast, but not fast enough. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, then back. "She doesn't work here," she said. "I didn't ask if she worked there," I said. "I said she was given a key." Her lips parted as if she were going to deny it again, then closed. She made a decision. "Come in," she said, and stepped aside. I went in and followed her into a sitting room that was dressed up to look casual. Soft chairs, muted art, a decanter that probably held something older than my first suit. And she gestured me to a chair, and then stayed standing, which told me she didn't intend to be friendly for long. "You should leave," she said. "Eventually," I agreed. "But not before I get a name." "A name," she repeated. "Who handled the lock replacement?" I said. "And who decided it had to be replaced today?" She stared at me for a moment, fighting with herself. Then she said, very quietly, "It wasn't Mr. Marlowe." That was the first real thing I'd heard all morning. I leaned back, relaxed, as if she'd just offered me a second cup of coffee. "No?" I said. "Then who?" Her eyes went to the door again, and her voice dropped another notch. "A man named Paul Renshaw." For a second, I didn't breathe. Miss Vane's broken engagement dropped into the middle of Marlowe's locked gate like a bullet into a pond. I smiled, because sometimes it's better than showing your teeth. "That," I said softly, "is going to interest my boss." I didn't ask the receptionist anything else. When a name like that drops into your lap, you don't paw at it in public. You pick it up, nod politely, and walk out before someone decides to take it back. I thanked her, because my mother raised me right. and left the townhouse with my ears warm and my thoughts busy. Outside, the street looked the same as it had 10 minutes earlier, polite, indifferent, expensive, but it had changed for me. Paul Renshaw wasn't just an ex-fiancé now. He was a hinge. You could feel the whole case creaking around him. I took a cab back to the brownstone. Wolfe likes prompt reports, and I'd learned the hard way that prompt to him means before he asks for it. The house was quiet when I came in, the good kind of quiet that smells faintly of coffee and order. Fritz gave me a look that asked questions but didn't ask them out loud, and I headed straight for the office. Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him, which was reassuring in a cosmic way. Miss Vane sat in the client chair, hands folded, posture composed but brittle. The key was still on the blotter. Wolfe hadn't touched it. That too meant something. "Well," Wolfe said, without preamble. I took my usual spot, leaning instead of sitting because sitting feels too much like submitting. "The lock on the alley gate is new," I said. "So is the one on the service door. Replaced this morning. Not just tightened. Replaced." Wolfe nodded once. "As expected. There's a man named Caldwell managing the premises," I continued. "Thin, nervous, careful with keys. He doesn't like questions." "People who like questions do not manage keys," Wolfe said. I glanced at Miss Vane. She was listening hard, her face controlled but intent. "I went inside," I said. "Front entrance. There's a receptionist who pretends this is a private residence." "She's lying." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "You are confident." She flinched at the right moments. I smiled faintly. When I mentioned the key, and when I mentioned Miss Vane. Miss Vane didn't react outwardly, but I saw her shoulders tighten. "And?" Wolfe prompted. "And the decision to change the locks didn't come from Marlowe," I said. "According to her." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "From whom, then?" I let the name land where it belonged. "Paul Renshaw." The silence that followed was thick enough to spread on toast. Miss Vane's composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but Wolfe saw it. He always does. His eyes went to her, not accusing, just measuring. "Mr. Renshaw," Wolfe said slowly, "is your former fiancé." "Yes," she said. The word was steady, but her hands had clenched again. "But I haven't seen him in weeks." "That is not the point," Wolfe replied. "The point is opportunity and access. Mr. Renshaw has influence over Mr. Marlowe's premises." "I didn't know that," she said quickly. "Paul never mentioned Larkin Sloane. He said he worked in consulting." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Consulting," he repeated. "A word that means nothing and hides everything." I added, "According to the receptionist, Renshaw ordered the lock change personally. This morning." Miss Vane stared at the key on the desk as if it had betrayed her. "Then he knew," she said. "He knew I had it. Or he knew someone had it," Wolfe said. "And deduced it was you." She looked up. "How?" Wolfe's eyes stayed on her face. "Because you were the variable. A new presence. A convenient one." I leaned forward. "There's more. Caldwell told me there was an unauthorized entry yesterday. That's you, Miss Vane. But he didn't sound surprised by it. More like prepared." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Preparation implies expectation." "Yes," Miss Vane said softly. "That's what frightened me." Wolfe nodded. "As it should." He sat in silence for a moment, and I knew better than to interrupt. When Wolfe goes quiet like that, he's not thinking harder, he's thinking cleaner, stripping away noise until the shape of the thing is bare. "Archie," he said at last, "did you observe the safe?" "No," I said. Only heard about it from Miss Vane." "Then that is a deficiency," Wolfe said mildly. "We must correct it." Miss Vane stiffened. "You want to go back there?" Wolfe looked at her. "I will not," he said. Archie will. I grinned. Field trip. Wolfe ignored me. You will accompany him, he told Miss Vane. Her eyes widened. Me? Yes, Wolfe said. Your presence is essential. You are the pretext. Archie is the instrument. I don't understand, she said. Wolfe's voice was patient, which meant he thought the explanation was obvious. Mr. Renshaw has acted to control access. That implies urgency. He will wish to know whether his actions have succeeded. He will observe. Observe what? She asked. You, Wolfe said, and the consequences of your usefulness. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with January. You're saying he might make another move? Yes, Wolfe said. And if he does, we will learn something. Miss Vane swallowed. What if he decides to silence me? Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. Then, he said, he will fail. She searched his face, found no reassurance there, and then, surprisingly, nodded. All right. Wolfe turned to me. You will go this afternoon. You will request an interview with Mr. Marlowe. You will bring Miss Vane. You will observe. You will not provoke unnecessarily. Define unnecessarily, I said. Wolfe gave me a look. Do not be flippant. I straightened a little. Got it. And Archie, Wolfe added, if you see Mr. Renshaw, I won't punch him, I said quickly. Not unless he really earns it. Wolfe's lips compressed. You will not punch him at all. Then I'll glare meaningfully. That, Wolfe said, may be acceptable. Fritz appeared with a tray, as if summoned by the shift in the room's gravity. Coffee was poured, cups placed. Normalcy reasserted itself, which is always the most unsettling thing when trouble is gathering. As Fritz left, Wolfe picked up the key for the first time. He held it between thumb and forefinger, examining it as if it were a rare insect. A key, he said, is a promise. It says, there is something you are permitted to enter. When that promise is revoked without explanation, it is not an accident. It is a message. What does this one say? I asked. Wolfe looked at me. It says that someone is rearranging the narrative, he replied, and that they believe they control the ending. Miss Vane stood. When do we go? Now, I said, already reaching for my coat. Before the author gets too confident. Wolfe's eyes followed us as we moved toward the door. Remember, he said, his voice calm but weighted, the purpose is not confrontation, it is revelation. I nodded. It always is. As we stepped out into the city again, Miss Vane beside me, the afternoon light slanting off glass and stone, I had the distinct feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching the clock, and that we were moving exactly when they expected us to. The cab ride back to East 61st Street had the feel of a rehearsal. Same street, same address, different stakes. Miss Vane sat beside me, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. She wasn't trembling, which I respected, but she wasn't relaxed either. People who think they're being watched rarely are. People who actually are tend to go stiff and quiet. That key, I said. That's because silence can be a liability. Did Renshaw ever see it? She shook her head. Not that I know of. Paul hated keys. He said they were inefficient. I snorted. That's a new one. I always thought inefficiency was a personality trait. She almost smiled. Almost. The cab let us out, and this time we went straight to the front door. No skulking, no side glances. If Renshaw was watching, I wanted him to see exactly how ordinary we looked. The bell buzzed after a shorter pause than before. Someone was expecting us. The receptionist was the same, tight hair, tight eyes, but now there was tension under the polish. She looked past me at Miss Vane and then back, as if checking a picture against a memory. Mr. Marlowe will see you, she said, and there was resignation in it. Briefly. Story of my life, I said, and followed her in. Henry Marlowe's office was large without being vulgar, which takes effort and money. The desk was heavy wood, bare except for a blotter, a pen set, and a small framed photograph turned face down. That last detail stuck with me. People don't turn photographs face down unless they don't want to be reminded of something. Marlowe himself rose when we entered. He was in his late 50s, well-fed but not soft, with grey hair that looked arranged by habit rather than vanity. His smile was practiced, but the eyes behind it were sharp. "Miss Vane," he said warmly. "Archie Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe's man." "Fieldwork division," I said. "We met this morning, sort of." "Yes," he said. "You mentioned a key." Miss Vane stiffened, but said nothing. Marlowe gestured to chairs. We sat. He stayed standing, which put him in control, at least in his own head. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "Miss Vane had access she should not have had. That has been corrected." "By Mr. Renshaw," I said. The smile froze. "Not entirely, just enough to tell me I'd hit bone." "I don't know what you mean," Marlowe said. "Sure you do," I replied pleasantly. "Your receptionist does, your manager does, and Mr. Renshaw does, wherever he is." Miss Vane's gaze was fixed on Marlowe now. "Why Paul?" she asked quietly. "Why involve him at all?" Marlowe exhaled, slow and controlled. "Paul Renshaw is a consultant. He handles delicate matters." "Locks," I said. "And risks," Marlowe snapped, the warmth slipping. He caught himself, glanced at Miss Vane, and softened again. "I did not authorize him to frighten you. If that has occurred, I regret it." "That's generous," I said. "Say especially since he replaced the locks after Miss Vane had already used the key you gave her." Marlowe's eyes flicked to the desk, to the blotter, to the space just to the right of it. Something wasn't there. I didn't know what yet, but the absence had weight. "I gave Miss Vane a temporary access," he said. "It was a mistake." "What was in the safe?" Miss Vane asked. Marlowe's jaw tightened. "Nothing of consequence." "Then you won't mind if we see it," I said. He looked at me sharply. "That is out of the question." "And that," I said, "is the consequence." Silence stretched. I felt it tug at the edges of the room, looking for something to catch on. Then the door behind us opened. Paul Renshaw came in like a man who expected to be there. He was taller than I'd imagined, lean, well-dressed, with the kind of face that photographs well and lies better. He stopped when he saw Miss Vane, and for a fraction of a second, the polish cracked. Regret, maybe, or calculation. "Lila," he said softly, "you shouldn't be here." She stood. "You changed the locks." "Yes," he said. "I did." "Without telling me," she said. "You weren't supposed to have the key," he replied. And there it was. The shift from personal to procedural. You were a vulnerability. I moved slightly, just enough to put myself between them without making a show of it. "Funny thing about vulnerabilities," I said. "They usually get discovered after someone exploits them." Renshaw's eyes went to me. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I exploit conversations." Marlowe cleared his throat. "Paul—" Renshaw raised a hand. "It's all right." He looked at Miss Vane again. You saw the safe?" "Yes," she said. "I saw it open." "And you didn't touch anything?" "No." "That was wise," he said, "because something went missing." There it was. Marlowe spun on him. I said nothing of consequence," Renshaw cut in, which was true at the time. I glanced at the desk again, at the empty space. "Small velvet pouch?" I said. Renshaw's eyes flicked there too, fast and involuntary. "You're guessing." "Educated," I said. "So what was in it?" He smiled thinly. "Something that belonged to Locke and Sloane." "And now?" Miss Vane asked. "And now," Renshaw said, "it's been secured." By you, I said. By me, he agreed. Marlowe looked suddenly older. Paul, this is not what we discussed. Renshaw turned to him. It's exactly what we discussed. Risk management, containment. And framing my assistant? Marlowe snapped. Renshaw's gaze slid back to Miss Vane. I didn't frame her, I positioned her. That did it. I felt the temperature in the room drop. You positioned her with a key you knew would be revoked, I said. You let her be seen. You made sure Caldwell noticed. Then you pulled access and waited to see what she'd do. Renshaw didn't deny it. She went to Nero Wolfe, he said calmly, which was predictable. Marlowe stared at him. You anticipated this? Of course, Renshaw said. Wolfe is thorough. He will find what needs to be found. And you're comfortable with that? I asked. Renshaw smiled. As long as he finds it in the right order. Miss Vane's voice cut in, steady and cold. You used me. Yes, he said simply. Because you were convenient. And because you would come. She nodded slowly. Sir, then you don't know me as well as you think. Renshaw raised an eyebrow. She reached into her purse and placed something on Marlowe's desk. Another key. Not brass. Steel. Worn. Renshaw's smile vanished. I kept it, she said. From Paul, from before. To a storage locker he forgot about. The silence that followed was different. Sharp. Electric. I smiled because now the game had shifted, and somewhere back at the brownstone, Nero Wolfe would be feeling very satisfied without knowing exactly why. Yet. Renshaw stared at the steel key like it was a live thing that might bite him. It wasn't pretty. No shiny new cut, no polite little ridges. It had the dull wear of use and the faint curve of a key that spent time at the bottom of pockets with coins. The kind of key you keep when you don't want anyone to know a door exists. Marlowe's eyes went from the key to Miss Vane. What is that? He asked, and the question wasn't business anymore. It was personal. Miss Vane didn't look at him. She kept her gaze on Renshaw, and her voice was measured, as if she were reading from a document she'd prepared. When we were engaged, she said, Paul kept a small locker. He told me it was for files. He didn't want it at his apartment. He said it was temporary. Renshaw's jaw tightened. Lila, don't, she said, the single word sharp enough to cut silk. I found the key in a jacket pocket after we separated. I didn't know what it was for. I didn't ask. She paused. I held on to it because I realized you were the kind of man who hated inefficiency but loved contingencies. Renshaw's eyes narrowed. You never used it. No, she said. So not until this morning. That made Marlowe blink. This morning? He repeated. Miss Vane nodded. After I left your office. After you told me to find the brass key. I took a cab to a storage facility on the west side. I tried this. She tapped the steel key on the desk lightly. Once. It fit. Renshaw's face stayed controlled, but there was a faint pulse at his temple. It was the only sign he'd given that anything mattered. And what? I asked. Did you find? Miss Vane's eyes flicked to me, then back to Renshaw. A folder, she said, and a pouch. Marlowe's hands tightened on the edge of his desk. The velvet pouch. Renshaw didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence had an edge. Miss Vane continued. The pouch was empty. Marlowe made a sound. Half exhale, half choke. Empty, he repeated, as if saying it might make it less true. But the folder wasn't, she said. It had copies, contracts, letters, and something handwritten. Her voice turned colder. A list of names. I watched Renshaw carefully then. He wasn't looking at the key anymore. He was looking at Miss Vane the way a man looks at a chessboard after discovering a pawn has reached the far rank. You took them, he said. I took photographs, she corrected. I put everything back exactly as I found it. That was foolish, he said quietly. It was necessary, she replied. Because now I understand why you changed the locks. Renshaw's gaze slid to Marlowe. Henry, he said, and there was irritation in it. You should have told her nothing. Marlowe's composure broke. You're talking as if she's furniture, he snapped. You said she was a liaison, a buffer. I didn't know you were using her as bait. Renshaw didn't flinch. I was preventing a worse outcome. What worse outcome? Marlowe demanded. Renshaw's eyes hardened. Exposure. I leaned in, because this was the part where people started saying useful things by accident. Exposure of what? I asked. Renshaw looked at me with mild contempt, as if I were a fly that had learned to talk. If you work for Nero Wolfe, he said, you already know the question is not what, but who. All right, I said. Who? He smiled faintly. People who buy clothes from Larkin Sloane. Marlowe's mouth twisted. Don't, he said. Not with him here. Renshaw ignored him. There are clients, he said, who do not want their measurements known. Not because they're vain, because their bodies tell stories. Scars, injuries, medical devices. Because a bespoke fitting is intimacy, and intimacy is leverage. I whistled softly. You've been collecting leverage. Renshaw's eyes didn't leave mine. I've been collecting insurance. And the pouch? Miss Vane asked. What was supposed to be in it? Renshaw's expression didn't change, but something behind it tightened. A token, he said. Something physical, something that makes men behave when paper fails. Marlowe's voice went hoarse. The ring, he said. Miss Vane's head snapped toward him. Ring, Marlowe swallowed. A signet ring, old family. One of our most valuable clients left it here years ago, after a fitting. He panicked and didn't want anyone to know he'd been here. Marlowe's eyes went to Renshaw with disgust. Paul told me keeping it was smart. Collateral, he said. Renshaw spread his hands slightly. It was, she Henry. And now it's gone, Marlowe said. Yes, Renshaw replied. Now it's gone. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of expensive air conditioning. I could feel Miss Vane's anger, but she was keeping it inside like a closed fist. So, I said, someone stole your collateral. Renshaw's mouth curved, or reclaimed it. And you, I said, decided the best way to handle that was to set up your ex-fiancé as a witness near an open safe. Miss Vane's voice was a blade. You wanted someone else's fingerprints on your story. Renshaw looked at her. I wanted a narrative that kept the ring out of police hands and out of newspapers. And in yours, Marlowe added bitterly. Renshaw's gaze flicked to him. In mine, yes, because I understand consequence. That was rich. That from a man standing in a room with consequence dripping from the walls. I stood up slowly, the way you do when you want everyone to remember you have legs and might use them. Okay, I said. Here's what's going to happen. Miss Vane and I are leaving. You, I nodded at Marlowe, are going to call Nero Wolfe. You, I nodded at Renshaw, are going to stay right where you are and avoid doing anything clever until Wolfe tells you whether clever is permitted. Renshaw smiled thinly. You think you can instruct me? I can try, I said. Trying is a hobby of mine. Miss Vane rose too. She picked up the steel key from the desk and slipped it back into her purse, not taking her eyes off Renshaw. You don't get to call me foolish, she said. Not when you're the one who left a key behind. Renshaw's gaze held hers. You were always observant, he said quietly. It was your most inconvenient trait. She didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the door with me, posture straight, face calm, like a woman leaving a party early because she's realized the host is a liar. In the vestibule, the receptionist looked at us with a question in her eyes. I didn't answer it. We pushed out into the street and the cold air hit again, welcome this time. It cleared the taste of Marlowe's polished office out of my mouth. We walked half a block before Miss Vane spoke. "I should have told Mr. Wolfe about the steel key," she said. "Maybe," I replied. "But then you wouldn't have had the satisfaction of watching Paul Renshaw's face do gymnastics." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "He's dangerous." "Yeah," I said. "But he's also predictable. Because Wolfe likes that." We reached the corner and I glanced back casually. A black sedan had pulled away from the curb near Marlowe's townhouse. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't hiding. It was simply there, moving with the confidence of something that belonged. "Do you think he'll follow us?" Miss Vane asked quietly. "I think he already is," I said, and raised my hand to hail a cab. The cab stopped. We got in. As we pulled away, I watched the sedan in the side mirror. It drifted into traffic behind us, smooth as oil. I gave the driver an address I didn't mean. 2 streets over, a hotel entrance with plenty of eyes. Then I leaned closer to Miss Vane. "Wolfe said revelation," I murmured. "Looks like Renshaw wants it too. The question is whose?" Her fingers tightened around her purse, where the steel key sat like a secret. "What do we do now?" she asked. I looked at the mirror again. The sedan held its distance perfectly. "We go home," I said, "and we let Nero Wolfe do what he does best." The cab turned, and behind us the sedan turned too, as if the city itself had decided to keep pace with our trouble. The cab slid to the curb in front of the brownstone like it had been trained to do so, smooth and obedient. I paid the driver, took note of the sedan easing past without stopping, and helped Miss Vane out. The front door closed behind us with that familiar, comforting finality, and for the first time since East 61st Street, my shoulders loosened a notch. The brownstone has that effect. It's a fortress built of manners and certainty. Fritz met us in the hall. One look at our faces and he didn't ask questions. He just nodded and took Miss Vane's coat. "Mr. Wolfe is in the office," he said. "He is expecting developments." "You could say that," I replied. Wolfe didn't look up when we entered. He was seated, hands resting on the arms of his chair, eyes half-lidded as if he were listening to something distant and fascinating. The key was gone from the blotter. That meant he'd moved it, which meant he'd decided it mattered. "Sit," he said, before either of us spoke. We did. "Archie," Wolfe continued calmly, "you were followed." "Not badly," I said. "Black sedan, polite, wanted to be seen." "Yes," Wolfe said. "That is a message." Miss Vane leaned forward. "Mr. Renshaw?" "Undoubtedly," Wolfe replied. "Continue." I gave him the whole thing, in order, without dressing it up. Caldwell, the receptionist. Renshaw's arrival, the missing pouch, the ring, the steel key. Wolfe listened without interruption, eyes occasionally flicking to Miss Vane when her name came up, then returning to their distant focus. When I finished, the room went quiet in the way it only does when Wolfe is arranging conclusions. At last he spoke. "Miss Vane," he said, "you have been honest by degrees." She didn't flinch. "I didn't trust anyone," she said, "including myself." "A rational position," Wolfe said. "However, you trust me now." She nodded. "Yes." Wolfe inclined his head slightly, accepting the contract as much as the sentiment. "The steel key," he said. "You have it with you?" "Yes." "Good." Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. "Archie, the sedan?" "It didn't follow us to the door," I said. "Which means it's parked within sight." "Indeed." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Mr. Renshaw wishes to apply pressure without appearing to do so. He is impatient." "And dangerous," Miss Vane said. "Yes," Wolfe agreed mildly, "but not in the way you fear. His danger lies in his confidence." I frowned. "You're saying he thinks he's ahead?" "He believes," Wolfe said, that he has anticipated every move except one. That exception is me. I smiled. That's his first mistake. Wolfe ignored the remark. The signet ring, he said. An object of leverage. Its disappearance destabilizes his structure. Who took it? Miss Vane asked. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. That, he said, is the question that will answer several others. He reached to his right and lifted a small envelope from the desk. While you were occupied, he said to me, I made a telephone call. To? I asked. Saul Panzer, Wolfe replied. As he is presently observing a storage facility on the west side. Miss Vane inhaled sharply. The locker? Yes, Wolfe said. Mr. Renshaw did not forget it. He abandoned it. I frowned. Then why leave the key? Because, Wolfe said, it was more useful to him as a test than as a safeguard. He wished to know who would find it and what they would do. Miss Vane's voice was low. He was testing me. Correct, Wolfe said. And you passed? She looked at him. By betraying him? Wolfe's expression was unreadable. By observing him, he corrected. That is not betrayal. That is survival. There was a knock at the door downstairs. Fritz appeared a moment later. A gentleman, he said, who does not give his name. He says he must speak to Mr. Wolfe at once. Wolfe did not move. Does he insist? He does, Fritz said, politely. Wolfe's lips curved faintly. Bring him. Miss Vane's eyes widened. Now? Yes, Wolfe said. The timing is optimal. I got to my feet, because that's what I do when trouble is invited into the house. Fritz returned with Paul Renshaw walking beside him, hat in hand, posture composed. He looked around the office with professional interest, taking in Wolfe, the chair, the distance. Mr. Wolfe, Renshaw said, I appreciate you seeing me on such short notice. You have not been invited, Wolfe replied. Nevertheless, you may speak. Renshaw's eyes flicked to Miss Vane. I see you've returned safely. She said nothing. Renshaw turned back to Wolfe. There's been a misunderstanding, he began. Wolfe raised a hand. No, he said. There has been a calculation. Yours. Renshaw smiled faintly. I respect calculation. Then you will appreciate this, Wolfe said. The signet ring you sought to secure was removed from your possession last night by Henry Marlowe. Renshaw's composure cracked, just a hair. Impossible. On the contrary, Wolfe said, Mr. Marlowe retrieved it from the safe after you left the premises. He feared your methods. Renshaw's jaw tightened. Then why change the locks? Because, Wolfe said, you believe the threat came from below, from Miss Vane. In fact, it came from above, from your employer. Miss Vane stared. Marlowe took it? Yes, Wolfe said, and intended to return it anonymously to its owner. Renshaw's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Wolfe's voice was placid. Saul Panzer is currently following Mr. Marlowe's courier. Now the ring will be delivered within the hour. The silence that followed was heavy. You set this up, Renshaw said. I clarified it, Wolfe replied. You, Mr. Renshaw, have been manipulating narratives. You failed to account for one, that men who profit from leverage eventually resent the hand that holds it. Renshaw laughed softly. You have no proof. Wolfe nodded. That is correct. I do not require it. Renshaw's smile faded. Then why am I here? Wolfe leaned back slightly. Because, he said, you followed my associate to my door. You wished to see whether I was real. Renshaw hesitated. And now, Wolfe continued, you must decide whether to withdraw gracefully or force me to expose you. If I do so, your career will not survive the scrutiny. If you do not, you may yet retain a fraction of dignity. Renshaw looked at Miss Vane, and something passed between them. Regret, anger, calculation. Then he put his hat back on. You always were inconvenient, he said to her. Yes, she replied. and you always underestimated me." Renshaw turned to Wolfe. "This isn't over." Wolfe's eyes were cold. "It is for you." Renshaw left without another word. The front door closed behind him. The house settled. Miss Vane exhaled slowly. "You were certain?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "Certainty is a habit." She looked at him. "What happens now?" Wolfe folded his hands. "Now," he said, "Mr. Marlowe will lose a consultant. You will gain independence, and Mr. Renshaw will discover that keys open nothing when the door has already been removed." I grinned. "Dinner soon?" Wolfe glanced at the clock. "Imminently." Miss Vane smiled for the first time that day, a real one. As Fritz moved toward the kitchen, the brownstone returned to its proper silence. Disturbed, yes, but no longer threatened. The brownstone has a way of absorbing trouble, and then exhaling it, slowly, like a man who's held his breath just long enough to make a point. After Renshaw left, the house did exactly that. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. Miss Vane remained seated for a moment, as if standing too quickly might undo what had just happened. Wolfe watched her without comment, his eyes calm, his hands folded, the case already filed away in whatever mental cabinet he kept for resolved human folly. "You told him Marlowe took the ring," she said finally. "Yes," Wolfe replied. "And Saul Panzer?" she asked. "The courier." "Also true," Wolfe said. "Mr. Marlowe did attempt to return the ring. Saul ensured the attempt succeeded." She nodded slowly. "So Renshaw was finished the moment he followed us?" "No," Wolfe corrected. "He was finished the moment he believed control was permanent." I leaned against the desk, satisfied in the way you get when the pieces finally lock together and stop rattling. "You never needed proof," I said. "You just needed him to understand that you could dismantle him." Wolfe glanced at me. "Understanding," he said, "is often more coercive than evidence." Miss Vane let out a breath she'd been holding for days. "Then it's over." "For you?" Wolfe said. "Yes." She stood, smoothing her coat. The tension that had defined her posture since the first morning was gone now, replaced by something steadier. Not relief exactly, more like equilibrium. "I owe you," she said. "You owe me nothing," Wolfe replied. "Your fee will be invoiced." I grinned. "He's very ethical that way." She smiled at that, then hesitated. "What about Mr. Marlowe?" Wolfe's expression hardened slightly. "Mr. Marlowe will suffer embarrassment," he said, "and expense. He will learn that delegating one's conscience is imprudent." "And Renshaw?" Wolfe's eyes were distant now. "Mr. Renshaw will seek employment elsewhere. He will find doors closed that were once open. He will blame circumstance." "That seems mild," she said. Wolfe regarded her. "You wished for justice," he said, "not vengeance. Justice has been achieved." She considered that, then nodded. "Yes, it has." Fritz appeared as if on cue. "Dinner will be served in 15 minutes, he announced. His gaze flicked briefly to Miss Vane, polite and curious. "You are welcome to stay." She looked at Wolfe. "You may," Wolfe said, "if you wish." She smiled. "Thank you. I'd like that." Dinner at the Brownstone has ended wars and begun philosophies. That night it was veal, done properly, with a sauce that could have persuaded a man to confess to crimes he hadn't committed. Wolfe ate with concentration, which is the highest praise he gives food. Miss Vane ate more slowly, savoring each bite like a reminder that the world still had order in it. Conversation was sparse. Wolfe dislikes talking while eating, and I dislike arguing with him about it. When the plates were cleared and coffee appeared, Wolfe finally spoke. "Miss Vane," he said, "what will you do now?" She didn't answer right away. "I've been offered another position," she said at last. "Different industry, less intimacy." "Wise," Wolfe said. And I'll keep my own keys, she added, as Wolfe inclined his head. Always advisable. She stood after coffee, thanking Fritz, thanking Wolfe, even thanking me in a way that suggested she meant it. At the door she paused. For what it's worth, she said to Wolfe. Paul always said you were a relic, brilliant but obsolete. Wolfe's eyes lifted to hers. Mr. Renshaw, he said, confuses permanence with stagnation. She smiled and left. The door closed. The brown stone settled again, deeper this time, like it had finally decided the disturbance was over. I stretched. Nice, clean finish, I said. No bodies, no headlines, no reporters on the steps. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Do not be complacent, Archie. The absence of spectacle does not imply the absence of harm. But the harm was contained, I said. Neutralized? Yes, Wolfe agreed. Not because the true crime was not theft. I raised an eyebrow. No? It was presumption, Wolfe said. Mr. Renshaw presumed that access equaled authority, that possession equaled power. He failed to recognize that control is always provisional. I nodded. Temporary access, I said. Like that brass key. Precisely, Wolfe said. A key that opened nothing because it was never meant to open a door. It was meant to open a sequence of behavior. And he misjudged the behavior, I said. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. He misjudged the people. I thought about Miss Vane, about the steel key, about a man who hated inefficiency and left behind the one object that undid him. Funny, I said. All that planning, and it comes down to one forgotten pocket. Wolfe shook his head slightly. No, he said. It comes down to arrogance. My keys are forgotten every day. Arrogance is cultivated. Fritz cleared the table with his usual quiet efficiency. The orchids upstairs would be watered on schedule. The red leather blotter would be straightened. The brown stone would resume its sacred routines. I finished my coffee and stood. Anything else before I turn in? Wolfe looked at the clock, then at me. No, he said. The matter is concluded. I paused at the door, hand on the knob. You know, I said, Renshaw thought he was writing the ending. Wolfe closed his eyes, just for a moment. Most villains do. I grinned. Good thing he didn't have the right key. The door closed behind me, and the brown stone held its silence, full, satisfied, and locked exactly the way Nero Wolfe preferred it.